Today, we're going to be hearing from Sarah Larsen. Sarah is the outreach librarian at the Minnesota State Law Library. At the Law Library, she is responsible for coordinating legal clinics and for training for self-represented litigants, creating videos, LibGuides, and other legal resources for members of the public. She also provides training to public librarians on legal reference. So welcome to Sarah. We will be having time for questions at the end, so please put any questions during her presentation in the chat. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. You should be able to see my screen right now. If anybody can just confirm that that is happening. Okay, great. Glad to hear it. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you a little bit about the project, our instructional videos project that we launched during the pandemic to better assist our patrons. Before I dive into what this project was, I do want to just give a little bit of background about the State Law Library, particularly for those of you who may not be familiar with us. The State Law Library is part of the Minnesota Judicial Branch. So even though we're part of the court system, we're technically a subdivision of the Minnesota Supreme Court. And although we're part of the court system, we are still open to everyone. And our mission is to make legal information accessible to everyone. So we assist judges and court staff, attorneys, employees of other branches of government, but we're also open to the public. And over the years, the number of public patrons that we've been assisting has been steadily increasing. And as of last year's figures, we've about 75% of our patrons are now people who are either representing themselves in a court case or perhaps just wanting to learn more about a particular area of law. So a lot of the work that we do is geared towards assisting non-lawyers to navigate a very confusing legal system. We do this in a variety of ways. Obviously, as a library, we have our print collection and electronic databases as well. But we've also developed a number of LibGuides on legal topics. We offer trainings for members of the public, for attorneys, for court staff, and of course for public librarians. And we also offer a number of clinics to allow people a chance to meet with an attorney and get some advice about their legal situation. And I'll talk more about those in just a minute. So a wide variety of things that we're doing to assist people, and we recently added some instructional videos to our toolbox of ways that we can help members of the public navigate the legal system. So just a reminder about our library services, and I particularly want to highlight our services for librarians. We do offer training on legal reference. That is something that we are happy to schedule with you. We can travel to your location, do something remotely. It's something that can be tailored based on the needs of your particular patron base, or if your staff are encountering a number of different questions, we can tailor something to your needs. The other piece that we want to make sure we mention is our reference assistance. I just want to stress that you can always send your patrons to us when they have questions. If you are working and somebody has a legal question that you're not sure how to answer, you're welcome to reach out to us and on behalf of the patron and ask us, or you can just refer the patron to our reference desk. I've got the contact information here on the screen. I've also included in the materials for this session on Sketch, there is a copy of our bookmark and then a handout with some other resources. So you've got our contact information there. So to give a little bit of background that will help understand the scope of our project, I do just want to briefly touch on the court system in Minnesota. So our court system is divided into multiple levels. The district court is the level that most people are going to be familiar with. And if people are having a court case, this is probably mostly what they're thinking of in terms of, you know, when you say the word courthouse, this is going to be kind of the setting you're thinking of. The district court is also known as the trial court. There's one in every county in Minnesota, and for cases, they handle pretty much everything. If somebody is dealing with a child support or custody matter, if someone's been charged with a crime, they're being evicted, if they're trying to probate an estate or apply for someone to get a guardianship or a protective order, all of those things are taking place in a district court. And statewide, there are somewhere between 860,000 and 1 million cases filed each year. So most people that are interacting with the court system, it's at this district court level. After that, there are 2 appellate courts. So there's the Minnesota Court of Appeals and the Minnesota Supreme Court. And the function of these courts is not to hear new cases, but it is to review decisions made by other courts. So the scope of this is far, far less. The Minnesota Court of Appeals handles about 2,000 to 2,400 appeals. So obviously this is a much smaller group of patrons that are going to be accessing this. And that lower number of cases means that there are fewer resources out there about appeals. Appeals are really, really complicated. Most of the judicial system is very complicated for people who haven't been trained in the law. And particularly when you get to appeals, it's something that lawyers actually specialize in quite a bit. It's not something that everyone knows how to do. There are really complicated procedures. There are really strict timelines that if you miss those, you might be in trouble and not get your appeal heard. So as the library that's part of the appellate courts, we have developed a number of resources and we've kind of become the go-to place to help with these types of questions. The State Law Library handles more than 9,000 questions each year at our reference desk. Typically between 15 and 20% of those are about appeals. So this is really our bread and butter, and we've worked very hard to create resources to help people navigate this very, very complicated procedure. One of the ways that we do that is our appeals clinics. So we currently have 2 clinics. Our unemployment appeal clinic started first. That's meant to assist people who have applied for unemployment benefits and been denied, or in many cases they received benefits but now have gotten a notice that they were overpaid and owe the department money. That started in 2013, and then our appeals self-help clinic, which is the more general clinic that assists with all different case types, that started in 2016. The number of people that are trying to represent themselves in these types of cases has steadily increased. Right now, 29% of all appeals involve at least one unrepresented party. And if you look at family law appeals, that number jumps to 43%. And for unemployment appeals, it's 80%. So there's a great need for resources to help people understand this process. And that's one of the reasons we started our appeals clinic and have created additional resources as well. The courts do publish appellate forms. There are these forms packets that include instructions and all of the different forms that you'll need. And it may be a little bit small on the screen here, but in the gray box where it's listing what the packet includes, you'll see that there are multiple forms there with kind of lots of legalese in the titles. And the step-by-step instructions are wonderful. They provide a lot of information, but for many people, getting this packet feels really overwhelming and is just kind of too much to take in all at once. The instructions are not written, they're written at a lower level than most court rules, which are full of legalese and very difficult to understand. But there's still a lot of legal terminology in here. They're not really adhering to plain English standards. And so they can be really challenging for people to understand. We have always made a point in the library to assist people with these forms, because when you're getting handed a stack of 7 different forms and then instructions that might be 15 to 20 pages long, people really do need a lot of help and may need that information in a different format. So before the pandemic hit, our appeals clinics were held in person. The clinics typically followed the same structure. The client would meet with a lawyer for roughly 30 minutes to get information and legal advice about the situation. For our general appeals clinic, we typically had 4 or 5 librarians out at the reference desk during the clinic. And so either before or after their appointment with the lawyer, we were there to be able to answer questions about the forms and go through those questions one by one. Whenever you're involved in a lawsuit, there's a lot of paper and copies that are involved as well. And so one of the things that we always assisted with was helping people understand how many copies they needed of each document, where they were going to be sent, and all of that. It was possible to do in person when you have so many staff available at the same time. You can spend that more in-depth time with a patron. The procedure for filing an unemployment appeal is a bit more complicated than say a family law appeal. So those clinic appointments included a one-on-one session with the librarian to go through the forms packet page by page. So the customer would meet with the attorney and then meet with one of us to go through that forms packet, just to make sure they really understood the procedure and knew what information um, they needed to have and where they needed to send it. Of course, then the pandemic hit, and everything changed, as it did for all of us. Our law library closed for 3 months in 2020, and when we reopened, we were open by appointment only for about a year. We limited the appointments, as COVID waves came and went. We limited appointments more more strictly, I guess you could say. And then we tried to assist people via email and phone as much as possible and really use those appointments just for people who couldn't get assistance any other way. Even after we reopened in June of 2021 without any restrictions on appointments, we still had mask requirements, social distancing, and a practice of limiting the amount of time we're spending face to face with any one person, just to try and prevent the spread as much as possible and protect everyone's health and safety. And of course, all of those restrictions and changes created a lot of challenges for us in serving our patrons, particularly those appellate patrons. Um, of course, the pandemic resulted in increased legal needs. We compared to 2019, and we received 1,100 more questions in 2020. So that's a huge increase in the number of questions we're handling. And that included a 30% increase in phone calls and a 175% increase in emails. So library users are facing increased needs, and then library staff as well. We're just facing a far greater level of reference work than we had before the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic complicated technology challenges. Many of our patrons don't have reliable internet or computer access, which makes it very difficult um, to be able to email them resources. Court forms don't work well on smartphones. Even for our patrons that are a little bit tech savvy and did have access to things, about half of our patrons access our resources through a smartphone. And the court forms just don't really work well on those. So it's a bit of a challenge to try and make sure that everybody is looking at the same thing and talking about the same thing. Um, Certainly any of you, I'm sure many of you have tried to go over, explain a form or look at a website with somebody over the phone, and without any sort of computer sharing, screen sharing software, that's really, really challenging. We tried to do some Zoom reference to be able to do screen sharing, but again, that's very complicated when somebody is trying to do that on a smartphone. It doesn't make it easy to show a court form that direction. And of course, the public health precautions created some additional challenges. We switched to a system where we have some staff working from home and some staff on site. And so even when the librarian feels comfortable spending that amount of time face to face with a patron, um, we didn't always have enough staff on site able to devote that kind of time. With 7 forms and 20 pages of instructions, it's not a quick process to go through these forms with someone. So certainly that complicated matters. And our patrons, by and large, prefer the remote services. A lot of our patrons took a very long time to feel comfortable coming back to any public space. So trying to find ways to assist them remotely was certainly a challenge. So as we were going through the pandemic, really the problem that we came to was how are we supposed to help our appellate patrons who really need a lot of hands-on help when we're not able to be together in person? And the solution that we came up with was a series of appeals self-help videos. So to date, we've created 4 videos. We have a Steps in an Appeal, which covers the process from start to finish, from getting their district court order to when the Court of Appeals makes a decision. We also have 2 videos that walk through the forms packets that go through page by page and explain how to complete those forms. And then we have a video on informal appellate briefs. Um, the appellate brief is the argument that somebody presents to the court, essentially telling the court why the decision was wrong and what they can do to fix it. That is a complicated document for attorneys to write, let alone members of the general public. There's a lot of legal research that has to be done, and so that was one of the most common questions we got asked of what are we supposed to include, how do we do research, and all of that. So we kind of took the questions that we received the most when we were working on these sorts of projects in person, and tried to create a video that would answer as many of those questions as possible. So now I'm going to play a couple of clips from our videos so you can get a sense of what we ultimately decided to do. This first clip is from our Filing a Civil Appeal video, and this is one of the videos that shows how to fill out the forms, going question by question.
Question 5 asks you to give a short description of the issues you want to raise in this appeal. For questions 4 and 5, remember that these should be short answers. You will have a chance to make a detailed argument later when you file your brief. Question 6 asks you to list any related appeals. For most people, there won't be any. If that is the case, write none. If you have other related appeals, list the file number and the party names. If you aren't sure whether question 6 applies to you, you can find a detailed explanation on page 4 of the Statement of the Case instructions. Question 7 asks about the record of your case. The Court of Appeals does not review new information in an appeal, but they are able to review documents filed in the district court and testimony given at a hearing or trial. Generally, if you want the appeals court to consider anything that was said at a hearing or trial before the district court, you will need to order a transcript. If you are ordering a transcript, check yes for question 7A. In question 7B, choose whether you want a full transcript or a partial transcript. A partial transcript only includes what was said during part of a hearing or trial, whereas a full transcript includes everything.
So that's just kind of an example of how we approached the process of going through the forms. The forms obviously are still using a lot of legalese, a lot of legal terminology, so we've tried to define terms as much as possible and make it as easy as possible for people to follow along question by question at home. The other part of the process that we really struggled with replicating was how to help people understand how many copies they needed to make and where they needed to send them. In person, it's very easy to have all the documents in front of you and create stacks and put Post-it notes on them. So we had to come up with a way to do that in a video setting to have that visual that visual cue as well. So this is an example from our unemployment appeal video that walks through the process of filing, of making copies and readying everything for filing and service. Once you have completed all of your forms, you are ready to file and serve your appeal. You will file your original documents with the Clerk of Appellate Courts, but you also need to serve your employer and the Department of Employment and Economic Development. To do that, you will need to make copies of your documents. Here's what you will need. You should make 3 copies of the petition, 3 copies of the writ, and 3 copies of the statement of the case. You should also make 3 copies of the unemployment law judge's order ruling on your request for reconsideration. Separate the originals into one pile. You will file the originals with the Clerk of Appellate Courts, along with a copy of the unemployment law judge's order. Separate the other documents into 3 sets, with 1 copy each of the petition, writ, statement of the case, and unemployment law judge's order. You will send 1 set to the Department of Employment and Economic Development and 1 set to your employer. You should keep the 3rd set for your own records. So we wanted to make sure that we're presenting this information in as many different formats as possible. We know that some of our patrons understand things better when we explain them verbally. Some people prefer to use those written instructions, and some people need the visual cues. So we tried to incorporate all of that as much as possible into these videos. So a little bit about the process of creating these. The first step, well, I guess I'll say first, obviously these videos we tried to make them look as professional as possible, but they are created in-house using common software. So there are places where they're a little rough around the edges, but essentially what we did was create a script draft that goes through each of the forms, explains all the procedures. We take the time to review the script and make sure that we're using plain English. We check the reading level and make sure that we're keeping it as low as possible, as much as you can, still using legal terminology. And once we've had a chance to make sure that we're stating things as clearly and as logically as possible, we go ahead and create the visuals using PowerPoint. The narration and the editing was done using Camtasia, which has been a really great tool for us to use and has made the process really, really easy. After that, the videos are hosted on our YouTube channel. Through YouTube, we've added the caption files, so all of these videos do have closed captions available based on the script that we drafted. And we've also added chapter designations. You may have noticed the total runtime of these videos is actually quite long, and we debated about whether to make a series of shorter videos or to keep everything in one place. And I think the compromise that we settled on was having the longer video that goes through the entire file forms packet, but adding chapter designations so people can easily skip to the particular form or stage that they're at. In order to get the word out about these videos, they are shared in a number of different places. We know that our patrons are coming to our resources in a variety of different ways. So the videos are linked on our appeals LibGuide. We also created a separate playlist on our YouTube channel, and we know that a number of people are reaching them through that. And then I think the most important way that people are coming to these appeals videos is through reference interactions. Whenever we get a question from a patron about an appeal or about our clinic, the librarian will include a link to the videos in our response relevant to the stage of the process that the person is at. The response from our community has been overwhelmingly positive. Our patrons have reported that this information is super helpful for them to have. They like having the alternate format that they can look at on their own and go through it at their own pace. And then for our library staff as well, this has been really, really helpful. Um, I know that you've all experienced it where you're trying to go through a form or a website or something um, while on the phone with another person, and trying to make sure you're looking at the same thing is just so frustrating. So it's much easier when we can say, here's the link to a video that you can watch that will go through everything individually. And it also helps us because we get a lot of patrons that see the forms packet, immediately feel overwhelmed and defeated. And we're able to say, go watch the video, have the forms in front of you, fill out as much information as you can, and then come back to us with specific questions. And that really helps people break it down into smaller pieces. And so patrons, instead of coming to us saying, help, I don't know what to do with any of this, they now come back and say, okay, I watched the video, but I still don't understand what I'm supposed to do for question 3. Can you help me? And that makes it a much more efficient and organized research interaction for all of us. Um, the videos, these total view figures are as of yesterday. You can see that we posted our first videos in January 2021, and then did another series in July 2021, and we've had a lot of views, and so we're feeling good that we're reaching the patrons that need this information and need this help. As far as our next steps of what we're hoping to do, we are working on some additional new videos. The next one that we hope to release soon, hopefully within the next week or so, is on filing an eviction appeal. Obviously, as the pandemic has gone on, evictions have become a real issue, and we want to provide resources to help with that. We're also going to be working on accessibility concerns. As I mentioned, we've got our closed captioning for these. We just want to continue to make information available in as many formats as possible so everyone can get the information in a way that works for them. And of course, the law changes frequently. And so one of the things we'll be doing is reviewing these videos and making any revisions necessary as procedures change, forms are updated, or any of that sort of thing. So that's a really quick overview of our of this project here, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Sarah. And please feel free to put any questions in the chat, or if you'd like, you can unmute yourself and ask questions verbally. Sarah, I had a question. How long did it take to produce those videos? They look really great, by the way.
Thanks. So start to finish, we probably spent about a month finalizing everything. In terms of the number of hours to create, drafting the script takes probably the longest amount of time, just trying to get the language correct and make sure that it's easy to understand. Recording and editing is probably the next most time consuming, and I would say we spent a few hours trying to get things lined up and recording everything. So length of time wise, probably about a month start to finish, and then a number of hours, probably 8 to 10 depending on the video. So they are pretty labor intensive, but we find it's absolutely worth it to be able to provide this information in a different format.
Okay, Elizabeth says, Sarah's quite humble. She earned the AALL Excellence in Community Engagement Award for the Law Library because of these videos. Congrats, Sarah. And then Chris is asking, is the tax court appeals process the same as other appeals?
It is not. It's a little bit different. We do have some resources on that, so stay tuned. That's hopefully one of the things we'll be covering in future videos. We don't get a ton of questions about those, but it is a different enough process that we will probably create some resources at some point.
I have a question. I'm Sheena Crandall. I'm from Century College, and I've made a lot of videos too for our students, so they're not nearly as eloquent as, as yours, but when I recorded them on PowerPoint, like slide by slide, and I tried Camtasia as well. I didn't find it that easy. I'm kind of wondering, when you record them on Camtasia, and then do you export them into PowerPoint, or how does that work?
So the process that I use, Camtasia has an option to import the slides. And so each slide individually is imported as a different screen. Then there's a function that you can record narration. So I just record the whole script, start to finish, as much as I can. And then there's a way that you can kind of chop up the recording and align it with the slides. And I found that works best because we also tried to record these in PowerPoint initially. And I find that I talk over the slide transitions, and that audio gets it gets deleted if you're recording it in PowerPoint. So that wasn't really working for us. So I agree. I mean, Camtasia is certainly not as easy to use at first, but it's worked better for us to make sure that we're getting the information lined up as much as possible.
Yeah, that's good to know, because I tried it and I thought, ugh, I mean, my videos are much shorter, so it's easier, but when it comes to the captioning, do you do that in Camtasia as well, or do you export that to a different, do your videos live somewhere else?
Yeah, the videos live on YouTube. There is a way to add the captions in Camtasia, but if you're posting them on YouTube, it doesn't transfer necessarily. So in YouTube, I create a text file. There's a caption file. I forget what the file extension is, but you can upload that into YouTube, and it will, if you have the caption file, it will sync it to the slides and to the audio. So that's what we've been doing. I just take the text of the script that we wrote and then add it along, so then it appears when you turn the closed captions on.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Doesn't seem to be any other questions in the chat, but I just wanted to make a little personal note. I put it in the chat earlier. When I graduated, I actually did my internship at the State Law Library. So I have a little
that's
connection.
awesome.
I actually helped update the new internet pages because there weren't any at the time, really.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. I know I'm biased, but it's a really great place to work. It's a great place to be. So
Well, if there aren't any other questions, we'll say thank you to Sarah. Sarah, that was a wonderful and informative presentation. We really appreciated it. Thank you for joining us today. And thanks to our audience for coming as well. So